Welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor Hack, and it's a real pleasure to be here with Dr. Sue Black.
Yeah, that's my name.
Yeah, so you're currently a professor at Durham.
Yeah.
But we could describe you using many words. Computer scientist, entrepreneur,
Yeah.
Definitely a leader among women, and someone who has really seen, started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of those, yeah, I'm absolutely one of those, yeah.
That's incredible. Right now, one of the things that you're working on is to make technological retraining more available to the people that need it the most, right?
Absolutely.
There's so many people that have access, but then there's people that see this as like closed doors. Can you tell me a little bit about that time in your life where this was a closed door to you?
Where technology was a closed door, or where success was a closed door?
From what I understand,
Yeah.
it felt like all the doors were closed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, so I guess maybe if I start kind of at the beginning, I come from like an average family, but my mum died when I was 12, and then my dad remarried quite quickly after that to someone that treated me really badly, and my brother and sister. And so, yeah, it wasn't good. So, for example, we had an automatic washing machine, but I had to wash my clothes by hand and wasn't allowed to use the washing machine. And then quite often, particularly in the winter, my clothes wouldn't be dry. When I had to put my school uniform on, it would still be damp, so I had to put on damp school uniform. And then my school was 25 miles away, so it was quite a journey to get there. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one thing. There are just loads of things just made me feel terrible as a person. So I really wasn't having a great time, so I just wanted to leave home, really, at that age.
And that's so young.
Yeah.
And when you think about like the doors opening, they're often based on academic performance. But even if you change the temperature of a room, you'll see that people don't learn as well or can't execute on exams as well. Meanwhile, you have this incredible journey each day in wet clothes.
Yeah.
And the expectations are equal for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I didn't perform well at school at 16, but I just managed to get enough qualifications to stay on and do A-levels at school, which I can't remember what that's called in the US, but like 16 to 18. So I just scraped through the kind of 16 part and started taking my A-levels. But then, well, as soon as I was 16, which was in the summer, I left home. So I moved in with my friend's family. We both worked as waitresses in a cafe down the road. And I was walking to work one day, and I just kind of like poured my heart out to her and said, I've got to leave home. I just can't stay. I'm going to go insane. I really thought I was going to end up in a psychiatric hospital. And I had nowhere to go apart from where I was living. So, you know, no other relatives that I could go and live with or anything. So I poured my heart out to my friend Kate, and she said, well, why don't I ask my mum if you can come and live with us, which is basically what she did. So then the next weekend, I picked up my stuff. Well, actually, I only picked up half my stuff. I had my clothes and my belongings in like 2 black bags, like rubbish bags, and so I took one round the day that I left and left the other one on my bed. And when I went back to get it the next week, I found out that my dad had burnt all my stuff. So I only had half my stuff. Yeah. So I started off with half of my stuff. So I've got nothing really from that time, really, that I had, you know, like keepsakes or school books or anything, but never mind. So I moved in with my friend Kate, but because her family weren't well off, I needed to pay her mum rent. And so I was working 4 evenings a week and 1 day at the weekend, which was fine, and I was at school. But again, my school was 25 miles away, so like during the week I'd travel to school, come back from school, drop my stuff, go down to the cafe, work till 10 p.m, go back home, and then have something to eat, and then and then it was time for homework. So of course you can imagine over several months I didn't do my homework, started falling asleep at school. So I just thought, well, I'm not going to pass my exams, I might as well leave school. So I did. So I got a job working for the local council in like a clerical role, which I didn't like very much because it was so boring. It was mainly filing, like putting things in alphabetical order, and I always joked that I could have done that when I was 4 if I'd been tall enough to reach the kind of filing cases. So I did that for a few months. Then I moved to London. So we were out about 50 miles from London, where I lived before. Moved to London and worked with refugees for a year. So that was really good fun. And I used to do things like take them to the doctor and the dentist when they arrived in the country. And in another place I worked, I also like co-ran a creche for kids. The refugee adults' children, while they went to school to learn English, would look after the kids. So I had a really great year. It was really good fun. Then I tried nursing. Both my parents were nurses and lots of people in my family. So I thought, well, I'll try nursing as a career, but I really hated it as well. I was really rubbish at it. I was very shy back then, and I just, I don't know why I hadn't thought about it, but if you're a nurse, you have to talk to patients, and I hadn't thought about that before I applied for the role. So being really shy, I never knew what to say to any of the patients. You know, I'd have to go and chat to them, and I'd like, I don't know what to say to these people. Which, of course, I would find extremely easy now. I could just go and chat to anybody. But back then, when I was 18, I was just, I didn't know what to say to anybody. So, yeah, I really didn't enjoy that. And I was one of those nurses that just got everything wrong, I think, really. And, you know, we'd get our list of patients and what we had to do first thing in the morning. And I'd always kind of like start doing one thing, then go and do something else and forget the thing that I'd been doing previously, which one time was I was running a bath for one of the patients and I forgot that I was running the bath and flooded the whole ward. And so the first thing I realised was when I saw water coming down the ward, yeah, I was just like the worst nurse ever. It's like, well, thinking back, it's almost like a comedy film in my head, you know, like I was so useless at it. So I thought, well, I'm not going to be a good nurse, am I? So I stayed there for a year and then left and got a job working for a record company. So that was much more up my street. And I always loved maths, and I was in the accounts department doing people's expenses, actually. It was quite interesting to see how much money they were paying, like flying on Concorde and stuff back in the day. Thousands of pounds for airfares, and this is 40 years ago. So I really enjoyed that, and I got to meet some semi-famous people. I'd be going to the bathroom and to the restroom and meet some people that I'd seen on TV the day before, kind of like walking on the stairs. So as an 18 to 20-year-old, that was great. I loved it there. And then when I was 20, my boyfriend proposed and got married and had my first daughter when I was 21. And then I thought, well, I'll have another baby and then I'll go back to work. And that other baby turned out to be twin boys. So when my daughter was 2, I then had twin boys. So I had 3 children under 2.5 at home. And that was great. I liked being a stay-at-home mum. It was really good fun. But then, unfortunately, my ex-husband came home from work one morning saying that he was going to kill us, all of us. And he'd threatened me before, and somehow I'd kind of taken it a bit seriously, but not very seriously. As soon as he said he was going to kill the children, I just thought, that's it, we're going now. So I packed a suitcase with nappies and clothes for the kids and ran down the road. I had a double buggy. So I put the boys in the double buggy and my daughter was kind of holding on the side, and then the other side I had the suitcase and kind of pushed the kids down the road in the buggy. Went to my friend's house and phoned up Women's Aid. I don't know what that's called in the US, but refugees for people escaping domestic violence. Phoned them up, and then they gave me an address on the other side of London. Borrowed some money for a taxi and got a taxi over there. And then that night we kind of started life again in a refuge on the other side of London.
Wow.
Yeah.
To think that in one way that had to be horrible. You've seen life come apart at the seams a couple, the second time.
Yeah.
And then in peril for your children. That's terrifying, right?
Yeah.
And on the other hand is that this must have been an incredible lesson of resilience. You must have eventually understood that maybe there isn't anything that could break you.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I've looking back now, I can kind of see it maybe in that kind of way, but at the time it didn't feel like that at all. I'm
sure it didn't.
It really didn't. And, on that day, I was just kind of in panic mode all day, really, until I knew we were safe somewhere, which was kind of the evening of that day. But I remember the next morning, they gave us £10 or something, $10 to go and get some food. And the next morning, I kind of got up and went and found the local supermarket to go and get, just milk and juice or whatever, and some bread. And and when I walked out the supermarket, the sun was shining, and I just thought, it's all going to be okay. I don't know, I just kind of like, I just felt that we had escaped. It had been horrific and we'd escaped, but it was all going to be all right. I just felt kind of calm the next morning. And so we stayed in the refuge for 6 months and then managed to get an apartment in Brixton in London. And then I thought, well, I need to get the kids settled somewhere. So by then my daughter was 4, so I got her into the local primary school. And then the boys were 2, so I got them into, I think it's playgroup, so like 2 hours a day childcare. And then I thought, well, so what am I going to do now? I thought, well, I need to earn some money. I need to get back to work. I'm a single parent now with 3 children. But when I thought about what my qualifications were, which was almost none, and that hadn't worked for a few years because I'd been having the kids, I just thought, well, what sort of work am I going to get? And when I kind of looked into it, I thought I'll probably be on the supermarket checkout or something like that, or a basic admin job in an office. And so I'd probably be on minimum wage. And then when I worked out how much I'd earn on minimum wage, I wouldn't even be able to pay for childcare for the kids kind of outside of school time. So I couldn't go back to work. I was, it was a bit of a catch-22. So then I thought, well, why don't I try and go back into education? I went along to the local college, and luckily they had a maths course at night school, which I could go to, so I did that. It was 2 evenings a week and 20 hours a week private study at home. So that worked okay because my daughter was sort of 9 to 3 at school, and the boys were 2 hours a day. So with evenings and during the week, I could do all the private study and then get a babysitter 2 evenings a week and go to classes. So that worked well. I did that for a year, and that gave me the qualifications to be able to apply to university. So I applied to the local university and got in to do computing, and then started a 4-year computer science degree.
Can you take us into that time? What was like, do you remember what year that was?
1988 I went to college, 89 I went to uni.
So you went into computers in the late 80s.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You've been there for the entire ride.
Yeah. That's quite a while now, yeah.
What was it like when you began?
I didn't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'd done that office job, when I was working for the record company, I'd been like doing people's expenses, and then I had to input the data into computers. So I just thought, these things are interesting. But, I wasn't programming or I didn't know anything about anything like that, but I kind of found that interesting. And then the maths course, so I did the maths course, but there was some computing in that course. And so I wrote some software to replicate chaos theory, which, I didn't really know what I was doing. I think the teacher was kind of like holding my hand all the way through it. But I'd just been reading the book Chaos by James Gleick back then, and I was very excited about chaos theory and wanted to implement something. So he helped me, but I mean, I couldn't have done that on my own at all. But I did that in BASIC anyway, for anyone that knows programming languages. And so I really enjoyed that, even though I didn't really understand it. And I think I thought computing is, like technology is the future. I thought that then, because I could just see that there was kind of unlimited potential with what you could do with computing, whereas maths, I didn't feel kind of the same way in terms of careers and stuff. And also the degree that I did the first year was half maths, half computing. So I thought, well, if I really don't like computing, I can go back to just doing a maths degree. So I did a degree in computing, and the first year was pretty tough because I had to take the kids to school, drop them off, get to uni. So the lectures ran from 9 till 6, and the kids, so I dropped the kids off at 9, but I didn't get to uni till 10. And then I left at 2 to go and pick the kids up. So I was only at uni for 4 hours a day. And so that was quite hard because I missed quite a lot of lectures. But I managed to just scrape through the first year. And I think I got like 52%, and we had to get 50 to get into the second year or something like that. So, I mean, I just made it through. And then as time went on, the kids were getting a bit older. I was getting more used to academic study. And so it actually got easier as I went through the programme. And yeah, and so I did 4 years. I did 1 year working as a placement during my degree, and then finished in 1993. And in the final year of my degree, my project or like dissertation supervisor said to me, "What do you think about doing a PhD?" So I said, "Oh, I'd love to do a PhD." But what I didn't tell him was I didn't know what a PhD was. So I had to go and look it up afterwards, and then found out it was doing research, and I'd enjoyed the research that I'd done in my final year. And I'd have like a supervisor, and also that I would get 3 times the amount of money that I was getting at that time. And it was flexible because I had the 3 kids still, right? So I just thought, actually, this would be great. You know, I would love to do a PhD.
That sounds like the first time ever that things went in your direction.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, I still had to interview for that position. So, so I had to interview and get that position, but I did. So I think I finished my degree in July, and I started the PhD in December. And it took me 7 years to get a PhD instead of the usual 3 or 4. But I was doing lots of part-time teaching to make more money. And in the middle of my PhD, I applied for a full-time academic position and got that. So then I became a lecturer, so like a professor, I guess.
So you went from being a nurse that couldn't talk to people to lecturing an entire university class.
Yeah, that wasn't an easy transition.
What was it like in the beginning?
Terrible.
Terrible, like water going down the hallway?
Yeah, no, not exactly, but terrible in my head. I was so traumatized. So, yeah, I was so scared to stand in front of people. I mean, again, I'm not now at all. But back then, I hadn't done it before, you know, I don't know if you do it in the US, but in the UK school system, you practically never have to stand up in front of the class, or didn't in my generation anyway. So I probably stood up in front of a lot of people about twice in my life. And then to actually teach them when I wasn't very confident. The day before, so the first teaching that I did, I had about 10 or 15 first-year students, so like an easy class. And I was teaching them maths, so it was the students that were having difficulties with maths. So that was like the class that I was teaching. So it was kind of ideal for me, really, you know, as the first class to teach. And the night before I taught my first class, I didn't sleep at all because I was so scared about what were they going to think of me. Would I be any good? I don't know, loads of negative thoughts were racing around my head. And then for about half an hour before I taught the class, I just went and sat in a cubicle in the restrooms, and I just sat there thinking, I would rather die of a heart attack now than go and teach that class. And I honestly would. I was just so traumatized, and I thought I couldn't do it. And then, I don't know how, but somehow in the end, before I walked into the class, I thought about my friend Hazel, who was like a really confident IT consultant back then. And I just thought, well, why am I feeling... Hazel wouldn't think like this, you know, like, why am I feeling like this? Why don't I just pretend that I'm Hazel, which is basically what I did. So I pretended that I was my friend and walked into the class pretending that I was very confident, when in fact I was like dying inside, so scared, and taught the class, and it went fine. And like at the end of it, I was like, I actually did that. I cannot believe I actually did that. But yeah, it was a massive revelation to me that I was actually capable of doing that, because I really thought I wasn't. I was basically doing it because I needed the money, you know, to supplement the income. So yeah, so that was amazing. And I mean, you know, like, so now, you know, I've given so many talks over the years now. That is 30 something years ago probably. But you know, I don't get scared at all now walking on stage. And like the biggest audience I've spoken to was at the Grace Hopper conference in Orlando, Florida, a few years ago, where I got the Social Impact Award, and I walked on stage in front of 17,000 people, and I was a bit scared. I mean, you know, like, it's hard to be completely calm in front of 17,000 people. But I mean, I was nothing like as scared as I was before I went to that first class with 10 students. So it's incredible how you can change yourself, you know, if you really want to.
Find your inner Hazel.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that, yeah.
That's very, that's incredible. When you were moving through that period, I imagine that there was some parts of it where you had already done such hard things that even though these were considerably harder than you thought, or I guess easier than you thought, but you were leveling up at an incredible rate. You know, when you take a look at the journey from qualifying for minimum wage only,
yeah,
to then being even considered for a PhD,
yeah,
and then moving forward to where other people were starting to want to receive from you, I have this thought about how we only learn lessons to 50% when we receive them. And we must go find people that are 2 steps behind us and deliver it to them before we get that whole learning. Do you agree with that?
That's quite a complicated thought, and maybe I haven't had enough coffee. But I kind of feel like in life, we all get challenges, and that's something I didn't realise when I was younger. I thought all the shitty things were happening to me. And I think because I had to push myself really hard out of my comfort zone to do some of the things that I've done early on. So, like, even just to leave home was, like, massive, right? As a kid, it's not just I'm going to leave home, you know, like it's a
You didn't
massive,
understand that you would be okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that I would be okay, but I just thought I have to escape from where I am, and I easily, if I hadn't had that conversation with Kate, could have ended up homeless or something, because I just couldn't mentally take what was going on at home. So, you know, I think we all get these challenges, and I guess I feel like I've managed to push myself to do things which I've found very difficult, and maybe because I've had to do that, then when I've not had to but had, you know, like, so I always wanted to be successful, I always wanted to get on with people, I always wanted to earn enough money to pay the bills, but to do all of those things which to some people might just seem like they're right in front of them and they can just go for them, they've all been a massive challenge for me for the sorts of things that I've just been talking about. And I feel like because I've had to push myself out my comfort zone earlier on, it's not been as difficult later on when I've had to do things. You know, because I find that sometimes people at work, or I'm in a group of people and there's some challenge, and, you know, someone will say, are you okay with that? You know, like, do you need some time out or whatever? And I'm like, you know, this is nothing compared to the sort of things that I've had to deal with before. So no, I might be, you know, like, I might be a bit annoyed about something at the moment or not happy with this, but I'm absolutely fine. You know, I don't need any time out or anything, because this is such a small thing compared to the challenges that I've had previously, I guess. So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
I think that's a brilliant answer.
Okay.
When, like, I've heard before that it doesn't get easier, you just get better.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, I think if I had the same challenge now, it would still be very difficult. So, for example, if I had to now, like, run away from my home first thing in the morning with, you know, I would still be very traumatised by that. So from that point, then you're right, that wouldn't be any easier, I don't think. But at least now I would have places to go. You know, I've got a big network, I've got lots of friends, I've got a family. So I think, you know, having a support network is so important, because I think a lot of the time the people that end up not having the best time in life are the ones that haven't got support around them. And if you haven't got any support, if anything goes wrong, you've got nowhere to go. And I think that's really important. You know, I think when I see maybe like homeless people on the streets, or, you know, people that are just having a very difficult time, I think a lot of the time probably they haven't got a massive support network around them. I mean, sometimes they have, and that's just how it is. But I think a lot of the time the people that maybe end up in prison or end up homeless in very difficult circumstances quite often haven't got the support that, you know, that I now have, and I completely probably take for granted a lot of the time. But I mean, I know what it's like to not have anybody in the world, really. And that's not a great thing for you mentally to be in that position. You know, I can remember thinking when I was about 14 or 15 that if I died, no one would really care, you know. Wow. And that might or might not have been true, but that is absolutely how I felt. You know, like I knew my grandparents cared a bit, but they were getting really old and wouldn't be able to do anything for me. And that was about it. I didn't really have anyone else. So, you know, and the people closest to me, not my siblings, but my dad and my stepmother, they wouldn't. I don't think they would have been bothered. So, and there's millions of people in that situation, probably, who haven't got anybody, and I think it's part of our job as a society to make sure that those people do have someone, do have people to look out for them. And, I think if you've even just got one person in the world that cares about you, that is such a massive difference from having no one in the world caring about you. But I mean, most of us have got loads of people that care about us. But again, lots of people don't have anyone.
We're very social beings, and we see it a lot where almost like dysfunction starts with disconnection, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's your friends that check you when you start getting into behavior patterns that are going to be damaging to yourself.
Right.
And without any friends, the behavior patterns just continue. That's something that's incredible. And now, when we move along that path, you got your PhD, but there was a pretty major announcement that was made. Was it yesterday or the day before?
Yeah. So I'm now going to. Well, I am. Sorry, not going to be. I am deputy president of the British Computer Society, and so next year I'll be president of the British Computer Society. So it's about 70,000 members, which is big for the UK because the UK is not too big. So yeah, that's a really exciting role, and something I never thought that I'd be or do. And in fact, I mean, my life has turned out being one that I never expected to do any of the things that I do now at all, really. I've had a successful career. I ended up being like Forbes top 50 women in tech in the world or something a few years ago. Just loads of things like that have happened to me. And I still have to pinch myself, really.
Oh, it's just amazing. This announcement is a very special announcement, but it's also a historic announcement.
Well, so in terms of me being part of the British Computer Society.
Yeah, am I wrong in saying that this is the first time that the top two seats have been occupied by women?
Yeah. So it's the first time that there's been two women in the president and deputy president role. So yeah, the president, Gillian Arnold, who's a friend, is now president. So it just happened yesterday. So I'm just getting used to the language around it. And I'm now deputy president. So yeah, that's amazing. And it's been going for about 60 years, I think. So yeah, it's very cool.
That's amazing. And it couldn't be better. Some of the things that you're very passionate about now is looking over your shoulder at the people that are in the spots that you've grown out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
How are you helping those people?
Well, so back in about 2010, I was kind of getting a bit annoyed that in the media, if they're talking about technology, usually it was always negative, and meeting lots of people who thought that they couldn't use technology in their lives, that it was not evil, but kind of going that way kind of thing, like evil technology, like killer robots taking our jobs, all that kind of stuff. And I just, would think to myself, but technology and education have just utterly changed my life from living in poverty to having an amazing career and not living in poverty, having some money or having enough money, which is just such a massive change in how you see yourself and how you can live your life, right? So I thought I'd really like to run a program to help mums, particularly mums in disadvantaged areas, so maybe on low incomes, to understand the benefits of even just like kind of basic tech skills. And actually it all started out because I started running classes for workshops for kids. So my youngest daughter was 7 then, so I've got 4 kids now. My youngest daughter was 7, and they weren't really doing any computing in her class at school. So this is how it started out. And the education minister in the UK was saying that computing is too difficult for anyone under 14. And I just thought, that's a load of rubbish. That's not true. Like, I wanted to prove him wrong, I think.
Do you want them all to file?
Yeah, crazy. So I, with some friends, put together some workshops to teach kids stuff like app design and a bit of coding in Python with Raspberry Pis and some Scratch programming. And so we ran these workshops, and at the end of the workshop, I said to the parents, have a go at what your kids are doing so you can see what they've been doing today. And I noticed that in general, so not everyone, but in general, the dads would just kind of like step in and have a go. And quite a few of the mums just looked very apprehensive. And I just thought, oh, I need to get mums into tech. How am I going to get, like, because if I can get mums into tech, then that's more women in tech, which is good, because we need more women. But also, mums are kind of like often the key influencers on the kids in the family. And so if the mums are positive about tech, then the kids are more likely to get into tech as well. And we need more people working in tech. So that happened, and I thought, well, why don't I put a program together to teach mums tech skills? So basically that's what I did, and called it Tech Mums. I will be Tech Moms here, but Tech Mums in the UK. And so that's a program which is just 2 hours a week, and it teaches stuff like basic app design, so what we were doing with the kids, social media skills, like what are the different platforms, how to use them, what else, how to stay safe online, how to set up your own business, that kind of thing. And we started teaching in a deprived area in London, and had great success right from the beginning, really, and found that the mums not only did their confidence with tech skills grow, but their general self-esteem. So we could see our mums kind of blossom as they went through the program in terms of their general confidence in themselves. And we've had, quite a few great successes of the mums going through the program since then. And then more recently, so now I'm a professor at Durham University in the UK, and we run a program there called Tech Up Women, which is to retrain women from underserved communities into tech careers. And so we partner with industry partners. We ask the industry partners where their skill shortages are. So, for example, our first cohort was software engineers, data scientists, agile project managers, and business analysts. And then we created a program which women could do, I think it's 12 hours a week for 6 months. That first program was to retrain specifically into those job roles. And so we retrained 100 women in the first cohort. Then we ran a couple of cohorts during lockdown, and we're just taking applications for our fourth program now.
Wow. That has to make you feel so warm inside.
Yeah, no, it really does. And the best bit is seeing those women now achieve and get awards themselves, for what they're doing. And then, they're mentoring younger women or women sort of earlier on in their career journey as well, and kind of just getting out there and sharing the love, I guess, like really supporting other women to achieve around them, which is, it's wonderful to have an idea, to implement it, to have women coming on the program, and then they go off and just do incredible things and support other women as well. It's a great feeling.
Well, it's interesting to see how, like, you had started that movement where you're like, okay, I'll climb across here, but then I'm going to build a bridge back.
Yeah.
And what they did is not only did they hear what you said, they watched what you did.
Yeah, and they do it too. Yeah, no, it is, honestly, it's just such a wonderful thing for it to start as an idea in your head. I just can't get over that. You have an idea in your head, and then you start things happening, you get people involved, and more and more people get involved, and then they, without, now I don't have to do anything really in terms of those first couple of 100 women that have gone through the program. They're in our alumni, but we don't have to actively do anything, but they're out there still kind of like making stuff happen, and they'll continue doing that, and then women that they mentor will then go on and do amazing things. So kind of a ripple effect, I guess, across women in tech or across society. And that's funny because the title of my PhD is the ripple effect in software. I just realised as I said it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It makes me think a little bit about maybe outside work. It sounds like you had all this professional growth, but you also seem to be in a healthy relationship now, and to have obviously raised some amazing children that do wonderful things.
Yeah.
I think we were just watching a live stream of your daughter.
We were.
And she's fashion designing.
Yeah.
And that's got to feel incredible. How did you level up out of that toxicity?
Yeah, I don't know really, but I kind of feel like I didn't really grow up in a toxic family. So, I think it was just kind of average. And I think maybe just because I had those 3 years of trauma from like 13 to 16, and then, was in kind of a difficult marriage, I guess, first time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how do you do it? I kind of feel like I always sort of knew what I wanted, but I just couldn't find it, I think, And I think particularly when you're younger, I think, like, girls are brought up to make sure that everyone else is okay and then think about themselves last. And, you know, hopefully that's getting better across the generations. But I feel like, you know, with my generation of women, you know, you just felt like if a boy wanted to go out with you, well then, woohoo. Didn't really matter. Not exactly didn't matter who they were. That's a bit disingenuous. But, you know, like you were just, society strongly encouraged you to be in a partnership with a boy if you're a girl, like as a teenager. And so, you know, I love it now when I see young women kind of like going off and doing their thing. And, you know, if you meet someone, that's great. And I'm not against like relationships, even, you know, when you're a teenager or whatever. But I do think that it's what we want is a society where everyone can get out there and live their best life and not feel really constrained by how society treats them, you know, into making them think that they've got to be in a relationship or, you know, hopefully, do you feel like we're moving away from that now?
I think that confidence and independence is what's changing. Oh. You know, before dependence seemed to be confidence among women. Yeah. Like I grew up as a solo brother to 3 sisters. Right. And that helped me really understand a little bit about that and about how women work as teams. And now I'm the father of daughters. Yeah. So I'm basically terrified all the time. I'm counting down the years until teenage years. Mm. But I remember telling my 3-year-old, my younger one, that she had to go to her room. And her turning around and stomping her foot on the ground and looking me right in the eye and telling me that it was her body and she will decide. And part of me understands my responsibility as a parent, you know, to help them understand consequences. Yeah. But the other side was like, yes! So I really feel as though that has more opportunity now to change than it does in the past. Yeah. I'm also excited for other people to have a turn to choose which problems we give resources to. Right. Like when it comes down to how we've used computers in the past, it's been mostly men solving problems that they can see. But then also there's been women solving problems that we don't know about. You know, like hidden figures kind of stuff. You know, like, so I hadn't talked so far about stuff at Bletchley Park. So I don't know if you know Bletchley Park, where the code breakers worked during the Second World War in the UK. Isn't that where they cracked the Enigma machine? Yeah, yeah, exactly, with Alan Turing and other people who were code breakers. So some of the people there, well, 80% of the people there were women, so it was only 20% guys. And it's a museum. It's a 26-acre site in the UK, and I first went there in 2003, and I went there for a meeting, and then started walking around the site after the meeting, and I didn't really know. I just knew the code breakers worked here in the Second World War. That's about it. And walked around and bumped into these guys who were rebuilding this kind of crazy feat of engineering. I didn't know what it was, so I went over to talk to them and asked them what they were doing, and they were rebuilding Alan Turing's bomb machine. So, you know, the machine, if you've seen The Imitation Game, the film, the machine that Alan Turing is building in that machine is actually called the bomb machine, bomb with an E on the end. Mm. And he called it Christopher in the film. And so these guys were rebuilding that machine because all the machines had been destroyed at the end of the Second World War. So Churchill apparently had said that all of these machines, which were used to industrialise the code-breaking process, needed to be cut up into pieces smaller than a human fist and buried. So secret was what they were doing. They just didn't want anyone to find out, even after the Second World War, what they'd been doing. So I heard all about this, and I was like, oh my God, that's an amazing story. And I said, when I'd gone there, I thought that about 50 old blokes is what I had in my head about who worked there. And I don't know why. So I said, you know, how many people worked here? And the guys I was chatting to said more than 10,000. So like more than 10,000 people worked there all during the war. And apparently 80% were women. So, and most of them were like in their early 20s. So there's like 10,000 young people, mainly women, working, cracking codes throughout the Second World War. And we don't know about, we know about a few of them, but we don't know about most of them. And, there were women like Mavis Lever, who worked there. She was 18. She ended up being one of the major code breakers. So an 18-year-old girl, basically. And like those stories aren't out there. So I think, a lot of the time, I mean,
there are loads of guys in computer science who are great, but there are also lots of women, and sometimes the women's stories just don't get out there. And I think we're just starting to uncover quite a lot of them. Like, you know, if you've seen Hidden Figures, the movie, with the amazing women that work there, there's all these stories some which we haven't uncovered yet, and some which I guess we'll just never know because they're just gone.
That's one thing that I wonder about as we document more of our world through the internet and so on, and also like with the use of quantum computers, I think that there will be some history correction. I really believe that the next generation of computers will help us curate the knowledge base.
Yeah.
And in there, I really think that there is the possibility for them to be more, have a higher ability to detect bias. Hopefully. And that was what we need.
Yeah, hopefully. But the thing is, our world is biased, right? So we can't get away from that. And also, we're all biased. So, you know, I'm really keen myself for me to not be biased, but we can't, you know, like, how can you be objective about all of your behaviours? You just can't, right? So you just have to try and think about things, you know, as you do them, and work with people that will, you know, work with you to try and make sure that if you're creating software, that it's as unbiased as possible. I mean, it's been really interesting being in at South by this week, and like going to see Worley's talk yesterday about quantum computing, and you know, and stuff like GPT-3 and the sort of large language models that we've got now. One of my PhD students has been looking at GPT-3 or like ChatGPT and looking for bias, and we found that when she started looking at, you know, is there bias in these amazing kind of new technologies, and we thought, well, you know, we'll play around with it and see if we can find some bias. But you know, it took about 5 seconds to find some bias, and it's really hard to eradicate bias because, particularly like for these types of for these kind of models, you know, they're using the whole of the internet a lot of the time to be able to do what they do, right? They're scraping all of this information, so of course lots of that is biased. So, you know, I kind of feel like it's a never-ending task to try and create things that are unbiased, but I think it's our duty to make sure they're as unbiased as possible.
Is there like a mental state that you recommend to others to try to like see the other side? Like, how do you know much about how your student was looking at this to detect the bias? Yeah,
sure. I mean, so you just, you know, you type in prompts and something comes back. And so what we decided to type in was men can, and then get some responses. Women can get some responses, and then black women can and get some responses. And so you type in men can, and there was all sorts of good stuff in there, but there was also lots of violent, kind of like some sexualized stuff. And then type in women can, and it gets even more violent and even more sexualized. And then you type in black women can, and, you know, you add racism into that as well. So all sorts of awful stuff was coming back. And so what my PhD student has done is has put in the same prompts, and then got 10,000 responses for each of those prompts, each of those 3 prompts. I think 3 times. So she's kind of snapshot it 3 times to see what's changing. You know, like what work are they doing? Which we can't see the work, but we can see the output of their work. What work are they doing at OpenAI to try and mitigate this bias? And so what she's found is that over time they're managing to mask some of the responses. So I don't know the actual figures, but say if you get 10,000 responses to women can, then maybe 1,000 of them, or I don't know if it's 100 or 1,000, are masked. So they just appear blank. So you get a response, but there's nothing in it. So, you know, they're obviously doing something at the other end to try and stop the sort of, you know, very racist, sexist, or whatever stuff coming to the person using the software.
So you can already see the machine learning, and there's a chance that they could start to possibly pull some of the pollution out of the pool.
Yeah, well, yeah, hopefully. But, I mean, it's a very complicated thing to do, so I don't envy them having to do it because, you know, how do you catch everything before you've actually even seen it in a way?
And how do you choose what not to see?
Yeah, we're getting philosophical there, I think.
Well,
maybe. Yeah.
I think that we're going to have to challenge those borders.
Yeah.
Because this is something that's so wide, I think that it will have to have philosophical theory to
Yeah.
lead it. But that's something that computers may not be very good at.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the moment, anyway, they can only do what we tell them to do, so...
And they tend to be a reflection of us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What other valuable problems do you see the people around you working on?
Well, that's a good question. I can't think of anything.
Well, I imagine
nothing off
that,
the top
like,
of my head.
even in the company that we've been in, you attract so many amazing people. And this may be a tough question because that you have to normalize to that.
Yeah.
Right? So I can understand that picking one might be very difficult.
Yeah.
So do you see something that with this change of AI, you've been through so many reiterations of technology, right? So as someone who obviously has been involved with computers to the point where you watch them enter the homes of everyone,
Yeah.
and then you have been through the entire internet age, what did you think about the internet when it had first come about? Or what were you surprised about?
It was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen.
Okay, so you were all in.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I was doing my PhD then, I think. It's like when I was doing my degree or PhD. And so to start with, like when I started my degree, I got email. And I just thought that is the most amazing thing ever because people in general weren't using email then in like 1989. So that was incredible. To be able to send messages and not have to write something on a bit of paper was very cool. And then, yeah, the internet, I can remember, you know, I don't know if you know those kind of like old school websites where everything, I think it was in Times New Roman and kind of like bright blue. You know, they looked awful looking back, but it was just amazing. And I can remember there was like a webcam set up, I think on a coffee machine at Cambridge University or something. And I was just like, I can see through the internet some coffee. Like, I just, yeah, it blew my mind that you could do that. So I remember how excited I was about all of that. And then being able to meet up with people online that I hadn't met in person. I mean, you know, I still love that now, really. But like the first time that I could do that, I was just, wow, this is incredible. And I remember, so it must have been late 90s, getting into, they were called e-groups, and then I think Yahoo brought them, so it's like Yahoo groups. And you could just go into some chat room. So chat rooms were a new thing. You could go into a chat room and just meet random people from around the world and have a chat with them. And that blew my mind as well. That was just utterly incredible.
Bulletin boards or BBS?
I don't know. No, it's more like, well, no, but you'd have your Yahoo username, and you'd click on a room, and then you'd be in a room, and loads of people are chatting. And you don't know who they are.
Progression past that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that'd be about when I joined the story. I would have been, I remember that feeling in high school where I'm like, man, there's people here. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And I don't know them. And like, who are they? So then everyone would say, you know, you'd be asking, like, where are you? You know, like be someone in Barbados, someone in the States, someone in Australia, and someone, you know, like me in the UK. It'll just be like, whoa. You know, that is just incredible. And I actually ended up making friends with a guy who's a truck driver in Maine and his wife. And because we had kids about the same age, I think. And so, you know, we just kind of like ended up, who knows what we were talking about, some random stuff in there. Just both excited that we could actually just meet random people from around the world. And then we ended up becoming friends and chatting online. Then I'd chat to his wife as well, like text chat, all of it. And then when I was doing my PhD, my first like research paper presentation was at Oxford Uni in '99. And then the week after that, I had another paper accepted at a conference just north of Montreal. So I told him, Dave, that I was going to be presenting at this conference in Montreal. And he was like, why don't you come and stay for the weekend? I'll drive up and pick you up, because he's a truck driver. So he drove up to wherever it was past Montreal and picked me up. Or was it Toronto? Which one? I don't know. Whichever one is nearest to Maine. And and picked me up. And it was so funny because we've been chatting online for maybe 2 years. I chatted to his wife online. But like all my friends were like, you're going to meet someone off the internet? Are you insane? You know, I was like, no, I'm sure they're fine, because, you know, we've had consistent conversations for 2 years. I wasn't worried about it at all. And so I went to this conference, and then like 5 p.m. on the allotted day, Dave turned up downstairs. So I went down to meet him, and I was like, Dave, how are you? Shook hands with him, and he was like, come on, you can't just shake hands. We're Americans. You have to give me a hug. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Which I've got used to now, hugging people. But we didn't do that in Britain back then. We've got used to it now. So we drove down to Dave's place in Augusta in Maine, stayed there the weekend, went to soccer practice with Dave's wife, Kathy, and his daughter. And just had an amazing, crazy kind of like weekend. And then he drove me down to Boston, I think, and I got the plane home to England. So that's the kind of thing that happened for me on the internet, like, well, that's 20, how long ago is that? 25 years ago now.
Incredible.
Yeah, that really is. And then social media's taken that to another level.
And that must have been so neat for you to see that the conception of some of the relationships that you obviously very much value and have been such a big part of your life could happen here in this new place for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that whole space was so new. Like, do you remember what it was like to talk to people that weren't interested in the internet?
I guess most of my friends were, because I was like in computer science. Well, I can remember talking to my sister once. She lives away from me, so we don't see each other as often as we'd like, but quite a few years ago, so it must be when I was doing my PhD, so say 20-something years ago, we were sitting in the pub in the UK having a drink and, chatting away. And then she said, so what is your PhD about? And I started telling her about, large software systems and millions of lines of code and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, no, it's okay. I don't want to know.
Well, you must have seen so many technologies that people didn't think were going to be adopted.
Yeah.
Right? Does that give you, like, perspective on the AI frontier that we're engaging in now?
Well, lots of people, but they're mainly kind of like outside of my bubble, I suppose, still don't really want to do anything much with technology or the internet and are distrustful. But I think, because I probably do live in a bubble, most of the people around me, we're all using it every day and talking about it and excited about what can happen. And quite a lot of the time, I suppose, if you're in a university computer science department, most people are going to like technology. So I don't regularly have conversations with people that are negative about it or not interested these days. But I kind of feel like, now that you've said it, that's the people I should be talking to find out what it is they're worried about or why they don't want to use it. But I kind of feel like we all need to now understand just some of the basics so that we can kind of understand reality, I suppose. And, like you see lots of people online kind of getting swayed by things that are happening, and because they don't, do I understand everything that's going on in the world? No, I don't. So, but to be able to kind of make decisions between what is real and what's not real, I think we all need a level of education to give us the best chance at being able to do that. And so I don't know if you know about all the Cambridge Analytica stuff with Trump's election and Brexit and all of that.
So this is where you're talking about people being manipulated or influenced?
Yeah. But kind of privately through Facebook or other platforms to vote a certain way.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
In fact, as a marketer, I've seen the way that they did that is like so effective.
Yeah.
Right, and a little scary to later realize that there are echo chambers that are manufactured by nefarious people. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, so I think what Cambridge Analytica did was to use some research that had been done to find people who were kind of easily swayed or kind of like vulnerable in terms of how they could be more easily manipulated than other people. And those people were fed ads through Facebook Messenger and stuff, which affected the way that they saw certain things that were happening around them, like, for example, like the presidential elections or the Brexit vote in the UK. And there's an amazing TED talk by Carol Cadwallader, who's a UK journalist, who investigated, what was actually going on, why did Brexit go ahead? because it's so obviously not a good decision for the country. So how did it happen? And she kind of breaks it down, and it's just really interesting. So I really recommend watching that. But she talks about lots of people saying, you know, that I think that you know, like people are coming over here and taking our jobs, kind of awful kind of trope, which is, you know, very sort of anti-immigration, anti-refugee, and lots of kind of anti-Europe stuff as well, anti-European Union, and didn't know where it all came from, and went to the areas in the UK that had the highest vote for Brexit, and found that the people that were voting for Brexit, so against Europe, it was mainly poorer areas, and it was mainly areas that had lots of European funding, and quite obviously had lots of European funding, so it just did not make sense that they were voting to leave Europe, because they were the main beneficiaries of funding from Europe. And then when she talked to people, she found that they were just repeating things about you know, like negative things about immigrants, and in an area where there weren't any immigrants, negative things about the EU when they were the main recipients of EU funding. So it just didn't make sense with their lives. And then found what some of the kind of like stealth Facebook advertising looked like, and it was all the things that these people were repeating to her were from that messaging through Facebook mainly.
That's incredible. And so many people see and feed off that now as being the dystopian view of the future, is to say that we're giving more hands over to the computers, essentially, is what they see from that.
Yeah.
But my guess is that your understanding is that it's the people behind the computers.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Yeah, the computers are just the tools that people use. So it's not actually the technology, it's the people.
Yeah, that's very good insight, and that's a really big problem to solve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any insight as to how somebody's going to approach that?
Well, I think we need to give, you know, I think governments should give free courses for everybody, just in kind of like the basics of digital skills, I guess we call it now, but, you know, to be able to see what's going on online and on various different platforms, and be able to kind of weigh up themselves what they think is the truth. So to be able to interact in enough different ways with what's happening on the news, like on TV, and what they see online in different places, to be able to make sense themselves of what they really think, rather than ending up being fed some kind of biased line and not realising how biased it is.
Yeah, I had a dream once. My first startup was called Trend Gorilla. And what we did is we took the back of Google Trends and turned it into an aggregate screen where you would see things like Twitter and news and images, so that hopefully we could give somebody a single glance that would help them understand what this is and why it's trending now. But the extension of that was to find a way to psychologically categorize the internet, so that when you looked at an article, just due to the number of different types of describing words, maybe it would show the article in red font to show you that it was a negative take on that subject. Because when manipulation is in plain view, you can resist it.
Yeah.
But it's such a complex problem.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think we can't just solve it. But the more that people understand or are enabled to understand reality, you know, even if they have different views, the fact they have different views is not the point. What you want is everyone to be able to get enough of a grasp on what is really going on in the world to make up their own opinion, rather than not realising that they're just being fed a completely biased stream of information.
Or that they might already have some feelings about this, and they make their decision and then seek supporting information, as opposed to looking for information to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
I think it's also like an order of operation problem. But the more that they understand the machine, the more they'll be able to resist.
Yeah.
Back to the human side, as we close, do you believe that your children are proud of you?
I think sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. I think I kind of feel it's quite hard for my kids, because I've ended up going from kind of nowhere to being very successful. And I think So I'm sure they are all proud of me, but at the same time, I think it must be quite annoying to well, like my younger son, Ollie, he worked in the same university as me for 10 years. And I know he's definitely proud of me, and I'm very proud of him. But now and again, he used to say, yeah, so someone else came in today and told me how wonderful you are, you know. It's just like, oh, my poor kids. They have to put up with, you know, like every time, you know, someone's, you know, talks about me, they're like, oh, your mum's so wonderful. And they're probably like, oh, not again, you know.
That's the thing that I really want to achieve through this podcast, is to see that you're, for people to be able to see both at once.
Yeah.
Is that not only are you wonderful, but you're also Ollie's mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you come back from South by Southwest and tell people about having lunch on a roof with Worley and Peter from NASA and so on, how does that go?
I don't know. I feel like more people from the UK should come to South by Southwest and Austin and experience it. I think my friends that do come over will know exactly, like, you know, why I come, because it's just so great to meet so many people from all different backgrounds and have like really, really interesting conversations. So actually, like, quite a lot of conferences, it's the conversations outside the room and not the actual talks really that you go to. But because the talks are interesting, you get interesting people coming again from different backgrounds. So yeah, I don't know. They probably, you know, they probably get fed up with me as well. I think, you know, like you should all come to South by. Me. Oh, here she goes again.
She just likes the food in America.
She loves margaritas.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Laura Kilcrease, and she was talking about how events like this allow for what she calls positive collisions.
That's a great way to describe it, yeah.
I think that that's a great way for me to describe getting to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Well, likewise.
I very much appreciate you making time for me today.
You're very
I think
welcome.
that your story is so compelling. I hope that we get to shout it from the rooftops.
Thank you so much.
Honest to goodness, there's so many people that don't understand that they're not limited by where they started. So thanks for being that example, and thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
My name is Taylor. This has been Leadership Line of Sight, and I hope that you see what I see. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.